Breaking news. He failed. Dominik Mysterio fails to help JD McDonagh against Rusev. Raw highlights. You know what absolutely grinds my gears? When a so-called brotherhood, a supposed family like the Judgment Day, crumbles faster than a stale cookie when the pressure's on. And last night on Monday Night Raw, we witnessed the most pathetic display of cowardice and incompetence from none other than Dominik Mysterio. That's right, DOM failed spectacularly when JD McDonagh needed him most against the Bulgarian brute, Rusev. And I'm about to break down exactly why this is the beginning of the end for Dominik's credibility in WWE. If you think I'm overreacting, stick around till the end because the evidence is damning. Hit that like button if you're as disgusted as I am, and let's dive into this dumpster fire. Alright, let me paint you the picture of what went down on Raw. JD McDonagh, the Irish ace, the high-flying daredevil of the Judgment Day, found himself in a collision course with Rusev. Now, for those who don't know, Rusev has been on an absolute tear since his return to WWE programming. The man is on a mission to reclaim his spot at the top of the card, and he's been mowing through everyone in his path like a Bulgarian tank. JD McDonagh vs Rusev was set up after JD ran his mouth during a backstage segment, claiming that the Judgment Day runs Raw and that legends like Rusev should step aside for the new generation. Bold words, right? But here's the thing about bold words in professional wrestling, you better be able to back them up. And that's where things get interesting. The match was scheduled for the second hour of Raw, primetime television, and the expectation was simple: JD would put up a fight, but if things got dicey, his Judgment Day brothers would have his back. That's what factions do. They protect their own. The Shield did it. The Bloodline does it. Even DX back in the day had each other's backs. Quick question for you in the comments: who do you think is the weakest link in the Judgment Day right now? Drop your answer below. The bell rings, and from the opening collar and elbow tie-up, you could see the size difference between these two competitors. Rusev is a legitimate 304 pounds of Bulgarian muscle, while JD McDonagh is billed at 185 pounds soaking wet. This was David versus Goliath, but JD has that scrappy, never-say-die attitude that's earned him respect in the locker room. The first 5 minutes of this match were actually impressive from McDonagh. He was using his speed, his agility, hitting Rusev with quick strikes and staying out of the big man's grasp. JD hit a beautiful springboard moonsault to the outside that had the crowd on their feet. The commentary team was putting him over strong, talking about how JD has elevated his game since joining the Judgment Day. But here's where the tide started to turn. Rusev caught JD going for a crossbody, and I mean caught him like a sack of potatoes. One fall-away slam later, and JD was in the corner reassessing his entire life. Rusev started unleashing those brutal kicks to the chest that sound like gunshots echoing through the arena. Thwack, thwack, thwack. 3 consecutive kicks that left JD's chest looking like a pepperoni pizza. The Bulgarian brute was in complete control. He whipped JD into the corner so hard that McDonagh flipped over the top rope and crashed to the outside. And this is where you'd expect a Judgment Day member to start making their way down to ringside. This is where the brotherhood should kick in. The camera cut to the backstage area, showing Dominik Mysterio watching on a monitor with his arms crossed. The commentators acknowledged it. Dominik is watching closely. Will he come to JD's aid? But DOM just stood there, watching, like he was binge-watching Netflix instead of witnessing his supposed brother getting murdered in the ring. Here's a question for the comment section: on a scale of 1 to 10, how loyal do you think Dominik Mysterio really is to the Judgment Day? Back in the ring, Rusev was setting up for the accolade, his devastating submission finisher that has made legends tap out. JD was barely conscious, draped over Rusev's back as the Bulgarian brute locked in that camel clutch variation. The referee was checking on JD, asking if he wanted to quit, and you could see the pain written all over McDonagh's face. The crowd was rallying behind JD, chanting JUDG meant day. JUDG meant day, expecting the cavalry to arrive. Even the commentators were selling the drama. JD needs help. Where is the Judgment Day? Where is Dominik Mysterio? And then, finally, Dominik's music hit. The crowd erupted because they thought the save was coming. Dominik strutted out onto the stage with that cocky smirk on his face, wearing his ridiculous prison outfit that he thinks makes him look cool. He slowly, and I mean slowly, started making his way down the ramp. But here's where it gets infuriating. Dominik wasn't rushing. He was taking his sweet time, jawing with the fans, pointing at himself, soaking in the booze like he was on a leisurely stroll through the park. Meanwhile, JD was dying in that accolade. His arm was raised by the referee once, twice, and you could see it was about to drop a third time for the knockout. Dominik reached ringside and started circling the ring, looking for the perfect moment to intervene. But Rusev saw him. The Bulgarian brute released the hold, dropped JD like a bag of trash, and locked eyes with Dominik through the ropes. The stare down was intense. Rusev was daring DOM to get in the ring, screaming at him in Bulgarian. And this is where Dominik Mysterio showed us exactly what he's made of, absolute nothing. Instead of sliding into the ring to help his fallen brother, instead of creating a distraction, instead of doing anything useful, what did Dominik do? He backed up. He literally backed up the ramp with his hands raised like, whoa, I don't want any problems. The disbelief on the faces of the fans in the arena. Kids were booing. Adults were booing. Even the commentary team couldn't hide their disgust. Michael Cole screamed, "Are you kidding me? Dominik is abandoning JD McDonagh." And Corey Graves added, "This is pathetic. What kind of teammate does this?" Rusev turned his attention back to JD, who was trying to use the ropes to pull himself up. The Irish ace was showing tremendous heart, but he was running on fumes. Rusev measured him up, kicked him in the gut, and boom, a thunderous machka kick that nearly decapitated McDonagh. JD crumpled to the mat, and Rusev made the cover. 1, 2, 3, it was over. But wait, it gets worse. After the match, Rusev wasn't satisfied. He grabbed JD and locked in the accolade again. The referee was trying to break it up, but Rusev was sending a message. He held that submission for a good 30 seconds while JD was completely helpless. And where was Dominik during all of this? The camera caught him backstage, walking through the curtain, shrugging like nothing happened. Finn Bálor confronted him immediately, getting in his face, clearly heated about what just transpired. You couldn't hear the audio, but you could read Finn's lips, and let's just say he wasn't congratulating Dominik on a job well done. Drop a comment and tell me, is Dominik Mysterio the most selfish member of any faction in WWE history? Later in the show, we got a backstage segment that was absolutely explosive. JD McDonagh was being checked on by medical personnel, holding his neck and back after the punishment he received from Rusev. His face said it all: betrayal, anger, confusion. The camera followed him as he limped toward the Judgment Day's locker room. When JD burst through that door, Dominik was sitting there casually on his phone, probably scrolling through Instagram looking at himself. Damian Priest and Finn Bálor were there too, and the tension was thick. JD got right in Dominik's face and the confrontation was heated. "Where were you?" JD screamed, his voice hoarse from the punishment. "I was getting killed out there, and you just walked away. You left me." Dominik, in the most arrogant display I've ever seen, just smirked and said, "I didn't feel like dealing with Rusev tonight. Not my problem." Can you believe that? Not his problem. Your brother is getting destroyed in the ring, and it's not your problem. Finn Bálor stepped between them, trying to play peacemaker, but you could tell even he was disappointed in Dominik. Damian Priest shook his head in disgust. The Judgment Day, once one of the most dominant factions in WWE, is showing serious cracks in their foundation, and it all stems from Dominik's selfishness. This isn't the first time Dominik has been accused of being selfish. Remember when he let Damian Priest take a beating from the LWO? Remember when he prioritized his issues with his father Rey Mysterio over helping Rhea Ripley? The pattern is clear. Dominik Mysterio cares about one person and one person only, Dominik Mysterio. As soon as Raw went off the air, social media exploded. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Reddit, every wrestling fan on the planet was talking about Dominik's failure. The hashtag Dominik failed was trending worldwide within minutes. Fans were creating memes, GIFs, and roasting Dominik mercilessly. One fan tweeted, "Dominik Mysterio makes Roman Reigns look like the most loyal teammate ever." Another posted, "JD McDonagh should have known better than to trust the guy who turned on his own legendary father." The internet is ruthless, and they're not holding back. Even former WWE superstar Matt Cardona, formerly known as Zack Ryder, weighed in on Twitter, posting, "When your faction brother needs you, you show up." That's Wrestling 101. The wrestling community is united in their criticism of Dominik's actions. But here's what's fascinating, some fans are actually defending Dominik. They're saying he was being smart by not getting involved with Rusev. They argue that Dominik was protecting himself from unnecessary injury and that JD should have been able to handle his own business. I want your opinion in the comments. Was Dominik smart for staying out of it, or was he a coward who abandoned his brother? Let's zoom out and look at the bigger picture here, because this isn't just about one failed save. This is about the systematic deterioration of the Judgment Day as a cohesive unit. Since Rhea Ripley got injured, the group has been rudderless. There's no clear leader, no unity, no sense of brotherhood. Finn Bálor thinks he's the leader, but half the time the others don't listen to him. Damian Priest is doing his own thing, chasing singles glory. JD McDonagh is trying to prove himself worthy of being in the group. And Dominik? Dominik is living in his own little world where he thinks he's the most important person in WWE. The truth is, Dominik has been coasting on the coattails of more talented performers since day one. He's been protected by his father's legacy, protected by Rhea Ripley's star power, and protected by being in a faction with legitimate main eventers. But when it came time for him to step up and protect someone else, he folded like a cheap tent. Compare this to how Roman Reigns handles the bloodline. Say what you want about Roman's character, but when one of his family members is in trouble, the entire bloodline mobilizes. They move as a unit. That's what makes a faction great. That's what creates legendary moments in WWE history. The NWO had each other's backs. Evolution protected their own. The Shield was brothers in arms. But the Judgment Day? Right now, they look like 5 individuals wearing the same t-shirt, and that's a recipe for disaster. Segment 8, what this means for Dominik, 1545 to 1745. So what are the consequences for Dominik Mysterio after this monumental failure? Well, if WWE is smart, and they usually are when it comes to storytelling, this should be the beginning of Dominik's downfall within the Judgment Day. Think about it logically. JD McDonagh is not going to forget this. That man has a mean streak, and he's going to want revenge. Don't be surprised if in the coming weeks, we see JD returning the favor, leaving Dominik high and dry when he needs help. Turnabout is fair play, right? Finn Bálor is already showing signs of frustration with Dominik's antics. How long before the prince says enough is enough and kicks DOM out of the group? Damian Priest has been vocal about wanting members who pull their weight. Where does Dominik fit in that equation now? And let's not forget about Rhea Ripley. When Mommy returns from her injury, and she will return, what's she going to think about Dominik's cowardly behavior? Rhea doesn't tolerate weakness. She's the most brutal member of the Judgment Day, and she's going to have words for dirty DOM. My prediction? We're heading toward an internal Judgment Day civil war, and Dominik is going to find himself on an island with no allies. He's burned bridges with his family outside the ring, and now he's burning bridges with his family inside the ring. This young man is speed-running his way to becoming the most hated person in his own faction. Quick poll for the comments, who should kick Dominik out of the Judgment Day, Finn, Priest, or Rhea when she returns? Let's talk about the real victim in all of this, JD McDonagh. This man has been working his tail off since joining the Judgment Day. He's taken crazy bumps, performed high-risk maneuvers, and put his body on the line week after week to prove he belongs. JD came up from NXT UK where he was a multiple-time champion. He's a veteran of the European independent scene. He's got skills that some people in the Judgment Day could only dream of. And yet, he's treated like the low man on the totem pole, expected to do all the dirty work while Dominik gets to play dress-up and act like a spoiled brat. The disrespect that JD showed by getting zero help from Dominik is going to light a fire under him. Mark my words, JD McDonagh is going to use this as motivation to elevate himself above Dominik in the Judgment Day hierarchy. He's going to start demanding respect, and rightfully so. I wouldn't be shocked if JD challenges Dominik to a match to settle this beef. Can you imagine? JD McDonagh versus Dominik Mysterio with Judgment Day's unity on the line. That's money. That's a feud that writes itself. And honestly, JD would destroy Dominik in a singles match because, let's be real, what has Dominik actually accomplished on his own? Nothing. We need to give credit where credit is due. Rusev was phenomenal in this match. The Bulgarian brute showed exactly why he's been missed during his time away from WWE. His presence, his intensity, his in-ring work, all of it was top tier. Rusev dominated JD McDonagh like a veteran should dominate a younger competitor, but he also made JD look good in the process. Those near falls, that hope spot with the springboard moonsault, Rusev gave JD enough offense to make the match competitive while never losing his aura of dominance. And that post-match accolade? Brilliant. Rusev wasn't just beating JD, he was sending a message to the entire Judgment Day roster. He was saying, I'm coming for all of you. That's old-school heel psychology at its finest. With this victory, Rusev has positioned himself as a legitimate threat to anyone in the Judgment Day. Could we see Rusev versus Finn Bálor for leadership of the faction? Rusev versus Damian Priest in a Haas fight? The possibilities are endless, and it all started with him demolishing JD McDonagh while Dominik watched like a coward. The WWE Universe has spoken, and they are not happy with Dominik Mysterio. Everywhere you look, fans are turning on DOM even more than they already had. The heat he's getting is nuclear, and honestly, it might be exactly what WWE wants. Some fans are speculating that this is all leading to Dominik getting kicked out of the Judgment Day and having to crawl back to his father Rey Mysterio, begging for forgiveness. Could you imagine that storyline? Dominik, humbled and broken, finally realizing that he threw away his family for people who don't even respect him? Others think Dominik might turn on the Judgment Day first, aligning himself with someone new, maybe even forming his own faction of young, arrogant heels. Dominik, Austin Theory, and Grayson Waller as a trio of entitled millennials? That could work. And then there's the theory that this is all a work, that Dominik is supposed to fail so that the Judgment Day can splinter, leading to a massive WrestleMania match where former members face off. Finn versus Priest versus JD versus Dominik in a fatal four-way? That's WrestleMania-worthy storytelling. What do you think happens next? Drop your wildest predictions in the comments section. I want to hear your fantasy booking. This isn't the first time we've seen faction members fail each other in WWE history, and it certainly won't be the last. Remember when Seth Rollins turned on the Shield? Remember when Batista turned on Evolution? These moments of betrayal and failure are what create legendary storylines. The difference is, when Seth turned on the Shield, it was calculated. It was a master plan to align with the Authority and win the WWE Championship. When Batista turned on Evolution, it was because he was tired of being held back by Triple H. Those betrayals had meaning. But what's Dominik's excuse? He was just too scared to help his brother. He was too selfish to risk getting involved. There's no master plan here, no bigger picture, just pure cowardice. And that's what makes this so infuriating to watch. In the history of faction failures, Dominik's abandonment of JD McDonagh will go down as one of the most pathetic. It's right up there with when X-Pac turned on Kane, or when Randy Orton turned on Legacy for no good reason. These are the moments that fans remember, and not in a good way. So here we are, folks. Dominik Mysterio has officially cemented himself as the weakest link in the Judgment Day. His failure to help JD McDonagh against Rusev wasn't just a momentary lapse in judgment, it was a character-defining moment that exposed him as a selfish, cowardly, untrustworthy teammate. The fallout from this is going to be massive. The Judgment Day is crumbling from within, JD McDonagh wants revenge, Rusev is on the warpath, and Dominik is public enemy number one among his own faction members. The next few weeks of Raw are going to be must-see television as this story unfolds. But here's my final question for you, the Wrestling Newsletter family: is there any way Dominik can redeem himself after this failure? Can he earn back the trust of JD McDonagh and the rest of the Judgment Day? Or is his time in the faction over? I want to hear your thoughts. If you enjoyed this breakdown and analysis, smash that like button. If you think I'm being too hard on Dominik, hit the dislike button and tell me why in the comments. Subscribe to Wrestling Newsletter for more breaking news, match analysis, and all the drama from the world of professional wrestling. Share this video with your wrestling friends who need to know about Dominik's epic failure. Let's get this conversation going across the entire WWE universe. And remember to turn on notifications so you never miss a video. I'm out. This has been Wrestling Newsletter, and remember, in the world of professional wrestling, your actions define you, and Dominik Mysterio just defined himself as a failure. Until next time, keep watching, keep commenting, and keep wrestling. One final comment question before I go: if you were in the Judgment Day, would you trust Dominik Mysterio to have your back? Yes or no? Comment below.